Hey everyone, this is gonna be a sort of review slash tutorial video on my Rilos MOC. I'm mostly just gonna be rambling about how I did certain things in this MOC, and yeah. Um, I will say first and foremost, there are lots of moving parts on the mock. So if you see a little bit of gapping here and there, it's because I'm going to be moving around a ton of stuff and showing you how it works. So keep in mind that when I actually build this and when I take pictures, it's always possible to hide most of the gaps that you may see throughout this video. And another thing I'm going to be addressing first and foremost is that it's gonna be quite hard to capture this entire mock in a shot for the video because of just first of all how my phone works. It's very if I really want to take a look at the whole mock, I have to be like this far away, and I'm like already a meter away from the mock. So so yeah. Um, I'll move the camera around as the video progresses so I can show you things in more closer detail. First of all, let's just take a look at the size. Have a minifigure here, and I'm gonna put it at its foot, and that's how big it is. So yeah, it's huge. I'm even putting my tripod on this sort of Tupperware of minifigures because I can't just stand it on the table. Well, I guess I can, but I won't see the face. It's kind of awkward. So yeah. Okay, so let's start with the head, and we'll progress down below. First of all, how did I do the articulation for the head and neck? There's this thing that I do multiple times throughout this mock called that I call stuffing, which is basically taking a sort of cloth piece and just putting it in a hollow area to fill it out. And it doesn't have to be particularly neat. I just stuffed it in, like that's why it's called stuffing. But it was actually kind of intricate for the head because the way the head is built, there are two hollow spaces, one on each side, separated with a middle column. And what I did was I took Kylo Ren's sort of crotch cape. It's a smaller cape piece that came with the Kylo Ren buildable set. And I stuffed the two parts that are separated into the each side, and I let the part where the cloth connects go down to the neck. And so what I get is that I'll bring it closer, and I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's actually just one ball joint, and this surrounding part here is cloth on either side. Without the cloth, it looked kind of gappy, but with the cloth coming down, it sort of hides most of the gap. I mean, you can still see a bit of gap in here, but yeah, it's all movable. And that brings me to another point, which is the fact that these two pieces are attached on a rubber tube piece. This one that you can see right there. And that means they're flexible. They can move around. And these pieces can rotate and go up and down slightly because of the gapping in the flick fire missile piece that I used to attach it. And with all of that, it allows me to move the head around, and I can even make it look down, look up, and these parts all move. Even though they move very slightly, they still move significantly to allow the head to move nicely and maintain minimal gapping. Throughout this video, I'm going to say minimal gapping a lot because I don't think it's... Well, I mean, it's possible to remove gapping completely, but it's not easy. So the best thing to do is minimize it. Now let's talk about the arms, because they're here. The arms, some of you may have noticed this already, and some of you may have not. And when you're making something really big, you'll find it hard to maintain the detail on the chest and still connect the arms directly to the chest. And the simple answer to give more articulation is to just not attach it to the chest. So what I did was I have sort of ball joints, which I'll show you in a second, coming from the arm to the back. So I'll flip this, not flip it, but I'll turn this around and you'll see what I mean. So there's this one right here going to the arm and this one going to the arm. And this allows me to move the arm quite a lot. And also the shoulder pads. Let me move this here for a second. These shoulder pads are on a ball joint on one of these. See, it's right here. So to move the arm, I just pick this up, move it out of the way. And let me show you what it looks like on the other side. There it is. So as you can see there, that's how the arms are attached. They're attached to the back and not to the actual chest. And this allows me to move the arms quite freely. And once I find a pose, I just sort of fiddle with it and make it sink in so that I minimize gapping. And also another moving part is this right here. Normally I also take this off while I move the arm and then put it back later on. So let's say, for example, I want to move the arm up. He's raising his hand. And when I'm done, I just put the shoulder pad back on and put this piece back on here. Adjust the chest so that it looks natural. And there you have it. So that's what it looks like. There's some gapping there that's kind of inevitable. I could just have more pieces here that cover it, but in most cases it's easier to just get a photo angle which doesn't see it. And some people might think this is cheating, but I honestly don't really care, because when you're dealing with something this big, it's quite difficult to get all your gaps covered. So yeah, so if you look at it from something like this, you're not going to see the gapping at all, right? And even as you turn it, you still don't see it until you're there. Then you see it. So there are really lots of options still. It's not, I wouldn't call it a major issue. So now that we've talked about the shoulders, let's talk about the elbows. The elbows on this one are somewhat complex, but I feel like I overcomplicated it. It doesn't have to be this complicated, but yeah. So let me move the arm down a bit, and here, I'll turn it to the side. So, okay, let's see if this works. Move down. No, I don't think so. 1 second. Alright, I think this is better. So I'm gonna try to get a good angle of the elbow and show you what's going on. So, in the elbow, I have this joint right here. So it's a double joint, essentially. And I have a friction adder, a piston style friction adder right here, connected to a head, and the head is connected to the forearm. It can swivel here and also here, and the ball joints obviously can swivel wherever they want. So, to get maximal range here, I allowed an open space right here underneath this armor, and I'll show you what I mean as I move the hand. If I want to move the elbow to its maximum extension, I need to hold the, I need to push this a bit. I need to hold this ball joint with my thumb because I don't want it to move here. I want it to move here only. So I hold this and I let it extend and push it back a little bit even and extend again. 1 second. And there you have it. That's the maximum elbow range. I'm gonna zoom out so I can show you what I mean. Doesn't look fantastic, but I think it still looks fine. And plus, he's supposed to be like robotic, so it doesn't bother me, essentially, what I'm saying. This strange thing going on here. But yeah. Now, if I want to move his arm somewhere in the middle like this, I can actually make it look more natural than leaving it like this. So what I do is I push back from here, push the piston, and now I make use of this upper joint right here, and I move it just like that. I mean, it's debatable which one looks more natural, the other way or this way, but yeah, essentially there are options with this joint. However, if I use this upper joint, then it's not going to get the maximum extension. This is as far away as it can go, which is still not bad, but yeah. Yeah, so that's the elbows. And when it comes to the arms, it's sort of a minor detail, which isn't really important, but it can articulate like this as well, because I attached it with 2 flick-fire missiles. The hands, you can see how it's built essentially from this. So yeah. And that's about it. So let's move on now to the torso articulation. Oh, but before that, I'd like to mention that some people ask me how I get certain pieces in strange angles. Like, for example, these pieces, and these. And 90% of the time, the answer is ball joints, because ball joints can move at every angle pretty much. So ball joints make everything really easy to put in an angle. It's just about the sizing and attaching the pieces together and managing the space that you have. So yeah, I'll show you how these are attached right here. Oops, that's not. I'm gonna move that thing out, and there it is. That's how it is attached, and that's why I can move it in many different angles. These pieces here are attached on the same sort of piece like this. It's like, I'll call it an old school hand, because those pieces are super useful. So you can see one of those hand pieces here, and that's just attached at an angle, and I can move it around. And now let's take a look at these. Now on these ones, I actually used clips and T-bars. Clips and T-bars make a really good combo for attaching pieces at an angle too. And I attached the clips and T-bar to an old school hand. So really, this is a combination of a ball joint and clips. Again, anything that you can move at an angle will give you these strange sort of shapes that you may need in a MOC. Most of the stuff you see here are actually attached by ball joints. Obviously, these feet are. This sort of pattern here is attached by a flexible tube, and that's why you can see from the side that it actually goes up and curves that way. Whoops. So yeah, and let's talk about the torso articulation. There's an ab crunch right here, and let's talk about that. So the ab crunch is essentially a hinge, because this MOC's very heavy and I didn't want to even try a sort of ball system. So I just use a hinge. It's a very strong hinge because there are 2 friction adders on 2 ball joints, and there are 2 pistons right here. So those places are where most of the frictions come from. This is a connection to the stand, which is connected to the friction adders, but these don't really affect the friction of the ab crunch. So let me show you how the ab crunch works. So first thing to do is to lower this piece. That's just a cover piece essentially, and the ball joints for the swivel are right here essentially. Not swivel, hinge, I mean, they're here inside. And we notice here I also put a cloth. This is just to cover more gapping. Now, before I actually move the ab crunch, I also want to get more things out of the way. So like this piece, oops, right here, needs to get out of the way. Same thing on the other side. And as I move the ab crunch, these pieces right here, I'm gonna show you that they're on ball joints. They're just meant to cover gapping again. They're gonna move as well, same on the other side. So I'm gonna hold them as I move the ab crunch, and how to move the ab crunch is by lifting the pistons right here. So I lift them up and I'll move forward. I'll show you that in a second here. So I hold these and I lift it up. I move the arms out. Oops. Lift them up. And there you go. So the MOC's leaning forward. I'm gonna push it back a bit with the stand. But yeah, that's about as far as it'll go. Try not to let other pieces fall off. Yep. So I'm gonna move the arm out of the way here so you can see how far it goes. It doesn't go that far, but I think it's significant. And whoops, this piece should be down. And yeah, see, it's quite useful for crouching poses. And yeah, and a lot of these moving pieces here sort of create gapping, but since they're moving, I can just adjust them. So I'll just do that real quick. So I can just move this forward, move this to the side, move this down a bit, and same thing on the other side. So really, after you pose it, it's mostly about covering the gaps. You see. And from the front, looks like that. I mean, these tie pieces can be moved around too, so yeah. And when he's crouching like this, because of the head articulation, he can still look up. I know he's in a bit of a silly pose, but essentially that's how it works. Now let's talk about the thigh articulation, which is something that a few people have asked me about, and it mostly works in the same way as the shoulder articulation. So let me move him back a bit. I'll push down on the pistons and hold him on the crotch. So yeah, hold these things so they don't fall off. But yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna take him off the stand for this one because it's a lot easier. So here, there's actually a handle for him right here, the back. This part right here connects to the center, so I can hold him like this. And so as with just a second ago, he's in a bit of a silly pose, but bear with me. It's not easy to show this on camera. So the thighs here have covers. These covers are quite important when you make big MOCs like this, because you essentially want a lot of ball joints connecting the thigh to the torso, almost like the shoulders, so you can have maximal range, but at the same time you at the same time you want it to be you want it to have minimal gapping, so what you do is have a thigh cover essentially. So it's things like this. They're colored in trans blue, these pieces, because I ran out of them in black. So yeah, but most of the time they're not visible, so it doesn't really bother me. My legs here are connected with I believe 3 total sets of bones, so to the torso, and so that gives it quite a bit of movement. Doesn't get the most range because it's big and heavy, but I'll show you what it can do. So once this is forward like that, I can move the leg. Move the leg forward about that much. Wait. Whoops, one of these pieces fell. I'm just gonna leave that to the side for now, but it can move forward about that much, which isn't a lot, but it actually is enough for crouching poses, and it can move to the side as well, which is important. So it can move to the side quite a bit, see? And move it forward, sort of see how significant of a step that is. Obviously, if you're not building in the scale, you can probably get more range out of it. The limiting factor of these ties as of the moment is that short ball joint you see right there. That's the limiting bone. I'd like to improve this someday, but as of now I don't have any ideas yet. I could just increase the length of it, however that will make the thigh sort of stick out from the body, and as it is, it already kind of sticks out, so I don't really want to add another length. Let me just put this down. As you can see there, the I'm sorry if this is like really shaky, but it's really hard to do this on camera, but yeah. So it kind of sticks out already, and I don't want it to stick out even more. So yeah. Someday I'll figure out a solution to this problem, but for now, this is how it is. And I'm not particularly disappointed by it because it's strong enough, like I said, to get crouching poses, and I think that's quite important. So yeah, I'm just gonna go back and attach the piece that fell out right here. So it's in the back, and let's grab this. attach it there. And yeah. So now let's talk about the knees, which I actually posted how to do the legs essentially. So yeah, but I used a ton of ball joint connections here, and I used 2 piston type friction adders right here, as you can see, because the knees are a point where it's a very significant point in which the weight of the MOC lies. So it's important to have strong knees, more so than ankles even, at least in my opinion. So yeah. So I have 4 ball joints with hot friction adders on the top rack here, like that. And let me try to get a close-up under the light. So I'm just gonna lay him down and show you what I mean. Okay. So I'm not sure if you can see that. There it is. So there's 1, 2, and another 2 on the other side. And on the bottom, I have this 2 ball joints, but they both have friction adders, as you can see here. And these pistons will add even more friction. These pistons actually limit the range quite a lot, but I believe they're very important because, again, this MOC's very heavy, and so it needs a ton of friction. And also, while the MOC's staying down, I'll show you the ball joints the ties are connected to that maybe you couldn't have seen before. So on each tie there's the 1 short ball joint that you see in the front, and these are the 2 bone sets. So there's one right here connected from this section to here, and another one from up here to down here in the thigh, and that's where most of the friction for the thigh comes from. So yeah, let me show you how the knee moves. So I'm gonna set this down here, and I'm really sorry this is awkward, but it can't be helped. I don't have a professional photo setup. So yeah, so what I normally do is I just grab it somewhere here, and oh, one more thing that I forgot. Normally I take this off. This is a piece that covers up an armor piece in the knee. I just take this off, just makes it easier. So I hold the middle of the knee and the lower leg, and I just gently push it up, and there's most of the range in the knee. Again, it's not a lot, but for a MOC this size, it's quite significant, I think. I'm sure I could do better someday. I've seen some people able to put these pistons in between the ball joints of the knee from the front, and I think that's something that I will explore one day, but I don't have time as of the moment to try it now, because I'd have to obviously take apart the whole thing and redo the leg. But yeah, and once this is moved, normally I can put this piece back on like that. So yeah, and I'll show you what it looks like from the front later on, but for now let's take a look at the last part, which is the ankles. The ankles are fairly simple. You can see how they're done essentially from here. It's more important to talk about the feet, which I'll get to in a second, but I just have a ball joint with a friction adder connected to another ball joint with a friction adder connected to a piston friction adder, and this this friction adder is on, oops, sorry, let me lean this down a bit. So this one is on a swivel here, so that means I can get some really weird angles, because see this right there, can swivel. So yeah, so I can twist it around and it's fine. And that small sort of snapping sound is just these pieces which I attach quite closely, but I can lift them off, and there you go. And once I'm done moving it somewhere, just push these spike pieces back together, because they're also attached with a ball joint. Like I said in the beginning, most of the stuff that you see on this MOC are attached by ball joints, because ball joints are absolutely wonderful. Now let's talk about the feet. This is something that's quite important for a MOC this size. You need to have a lot of friction, and I added rubber tires to the feet so that it grips the ground nicely. So I added one here and some here. And this is actually, I think that this is an illegal connection, because these pieces which attach the top feet to the bottom set of essentially soles, the bottom soles, they're kind of stretched a bit because of the extra thickness of the tire here, and not in the front though, but the ones here at least. So it sort of bends forward a bit, but I think when I was putting this on, it didn't feel very significant, so I don't mind it at all. And I believe these are quite strong pieces. I don't think they're gonna crack anytime soon. In fact, I don't think they're gonna crack at all, because the plastic is quite thick. So yeah, I don't mind this. And so essentially, the rubber soles here and here make the add a lot of friction essentially to the ground. And it's actually even possible to add some more here, but I decided not to, because oops, yeah, I just added a connection piece to strengthen these two attaching to each other. But it's actually possible to add more rubber tires like these here. The one up front is a different tire. It's the thicker one compared to the one at the back, and I'll show you that there. So that's what it looks like from the front, and it's the cover. So that's pretty much most of the MOC. It's quite tiring to cover all of this, but yeah. Now I'll try to show you the MOC standing on its own without the stand. But actually, yeah, I'll do that first, and I'll talk about the stand last, because I think less people are interested with the stand, although I think it's significant, because when you build a big MOC like this, you want to be able to display it, but with a sense of confidence that it's not going to fall on its own. So yeah, give me a second while I set up the MOC again, and I'll show you how I stand it up, and also show you the weapon. Alright, so I've been standing up just like this. It's not bleeding on the wall or anything, so I'll show you that here. And this took me about 5 minutes. It actually doesn't take him that long to stand him up. What takes longer is to manage all the moving parts, like the arm, the chest armor. Even now I see that one of them is a bit crooked on the chest. The shoulder pads, everything. All the little moving parts actually cause the process of standing him up without a stand to be longer. Where in fact the actual stability of the MOC isn't that big of an issue, at least in my opinion, when it comes to standing him up. So yeah, so that's about it. I want to talk a bit about the proportions lastly before I get to the stand. I sort of took inspiration from comic characters to make him look really muscular and intimidating, essentially. And mainly I took inspiration from this figure that you've probably seen on my Instagram. This is just a Batman figure, but oops, he's fallen down. So he's got very broad shoulders. He's got a wide chest to go along. He's got long, thick thighs, and the ratio of everything, including the size of the head, I tried to essentially make it as similar as this, so that the MOC looks intimidating. So yeah. I forgot another thing before the stand, and that's the weapon. The weapon's quite long. It's a halberd, and it's just attached with a pin, a Technic pin, and on one of the hands, as you can see there, I have a Technic pin that comes out of it, and that essentially attaches to this. And so yeah, that's how I attach the hand. And also to attach the halberd to different parts of the, essentially like to vary the length of the halberd in which he's holding it in, so to move it here or here, something like that. This piece obviously can just be moved around and replace any of these other pieces. Oh, not this, but you know. So yeah, that can be adjusted throughout. It can also be flipped depending on how I want it to be positioned in the hand. And yeah, now let's talk about the stand, which is the last thing to cover. This is the stand that I made for it, and it's got several important parts I need to cover. Not a lot, but there's some key parts. And first of all, it's the actual stand section, which is connected at the base here. It's very sturdy. See, it's touched very strongly, and you can see the sort of stretch of the plastic throughout even. But yeah, and there's a double ratchet joint here and here. I don't normally use this one anymore. I used to use this on the MOC, but I find that it's much better to use the ball joint arms, which connect to the back of the MOC, which I'll show you later. You may have already seen it just now. And the legs attach here. Well, they don't really attach, they just sit on these things, because on the feet there are actually hollow points that are as tall as 2 Technic pins. So when I want him to stand in a vanilla pose, I put him here, and the feet will face directly outwards. I can have him on a crouching pose, and I'll have both feet here and here. Or I can have him in a semi-crouching pose with having 1 foot here and 1 foot here, for example. And I have these 2 pins right here. These are adjustable. And so, whoops, I just dropped one, but looks like this. And if I lift this up, I'll leave those out. So these can essentially be moved around on the stand itself. There aren't too many places that I can put them in, but there are a number of them. And also, the reason why I use these instead of just a straight up blue pin is because these are stronger than a blue pin. But obviously you can, if you make a similar MOC, you can still use blue pins and just attach them anywhere there's a hole, and then you can fit the foot on it, and that way it's strong. But really, if I'm gonna leave it overnight, I'm most likely gonna put it here or here, because these are really strong. They're obviously attached like that. They're the L pieces. So yeah, they're really strong, and this stand here helps it balance it, and that's it. And that's how I display him on my table or shelf or whatever. So yeah, I'll show you how I put him on the stand in a second. So I'll just do it live. I know this This video is long enough, but I don't think this should take very long. So I just pick him up. First thing to do is move this out of the way. Back. I'm not sure if you can see it. I'll move it back. And is that going? Yep. Okay. So I just place the feet in on the two hollow spots that I told you about. One on each foot. So rotate the foot a bit because they face forward. And I'll show you the back. Hopefully you can see it. So right there. Okay, so right here, there's a ball joint. I'm gonna get real close and try to focus. There it is. Ball joint right here. Same on the other side. And that's how I attach the stand. Oops. So I'll move this back. Bring this forward as close as possible. And just bring the ball and the socket on the stand. Connect it. Connect one. Connect the other. Now, the last thing to do is just adjust the legs so that they don't bend too forward. Right now it's leaning way too forward because when I was attaching the top, these sort of move forward because of the weight of the MOC. So what I can do is I can pull this back, push this up, and lean the thighs forward a bit, the waist, and there we have it. It's securely attached. Only takes like a minute or two, and I think it looks good. So yeah, if you watched this entire thing, thanks for watching. I tried my best not to ramble a lot, but yeah. So we covered most of the MOC. If you have any questions on how to do things, I'll gladly answer you. However, I will not be sharing any instructions whatsoever. Someday I will share more pictures of the frame. There really isn't an actual frame for this MOC, except for the legs and the a bit of the waist, but the rest of it is fairly specific to this MOC. However, I think I may have already shared it, but I'll check if I haven't. I actually use a very similar center of the chest for all of my MOCs, and I find it like extremely versatile because it really it simplifies things a lot for the beginning of a MOC, and I think I'll share that soon. But yeah, in fact, by the time you're watching this, it'll probably already be shared because I need to upload this from the UK where the internet's good, because the internet in my home is not good at all. But yeah, so that's about it. Oh, one final thing. The last piece of cloth that I stuffed in him was right here. So inside the pistons, there's a full cloth cape inside the body because most of it, well, not most of it, but there's a good hollow chunk in there. So instead of stuffing pieces in there and spending lots of time just trying to fill it out, I just stuff a cloth cape because that makes it so much simpler. And technically speaking, it's still all Lego. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again later.